So welcome to this special Lunch and Learn program offered by NAMI Mainline PA. I'm Lisa Parker. I'm the coordinator of education and outreach. So for those of us who aren't familiar with us, NAMI Mainline PA provides free education, information, and support to people with mental health conditions and their family members across Delaware County and in Lower Merion Township. So please go to our website to see mental health resources, what's coming up, to sign up for our newsletter. I just wanted to highlight that our family to family course for family members of those who have a mental health condition and our peer-to-peer course for those with a mental health condition will be starting in the beginning of June. I'll send you the flyers and information as a follow-up to this session, but these are free mental health opportunities that we really hope you share with your communities. So we're so pleased to host this program where our guest speakers will explore how to reach out to people in your faith community who are struggling with their mental health, as well as making effective mental health referrals. So this is going to be much more of a conversation than a presentation. We ask that you put your questions in the chat, and we'll have time for Q&A near the end of the session. Please, if you haven't already, put your microphone on mute. And again, reminder that this session is being recorded so we can share it later. Our presenters today are Pastor Dickie Robbins and NAMI Mainline PA board member Lisa Kostaneski. Pastor Robbins recently celebrated 48 years of ministry, serving 40 years as senior pastor at K-Life in Christ Ministries in Chester. Since graduating from Bryn Mawr College of Graduate School of Social Work and Social Research in 2004, he works with the Chester Education Foundation as the Community Resource Hub Director and provides counseling services to clients on a weekly basis. Additionally, he assists clients with other felt needs by connecting them with agencies that are able to provide needed services. Mary Lisa Kostaneski worked for over 30 years in private and public education at both the elementary and middle school levels as both a classroom teacher and building principal. Prior to retirement, she earned also her MSS from Bryn Mawr Graduate School and is now pursuing her second career in social work. So to get the conversation started, welcome Pastor Robbins and Lisa. And if we could just begin the conversation with some thoughts about what you think people who are struggling with their mental health need from faith leaders and even community members in faith communities.
Well, Lisa, thank you. I'll start having served as a pastor in faith community for a number of years. One of the things that I believe that people need most is to be heard and to be listened to. I believe that faith leaders are uniquely positioned to see and to recognize people who might be struggling with mental illness. But unfortunately, many faith leaders don't know how to recognize the signs, even if they are right there under our noses. And unfortunately, because signs have been missed, not just by faith leaders, but by family members, many of those failures to recognize signs have led to tragic outcomes. Lisa, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think as a community, a faith community member, that idea of just really seeing people, and noticing them. And if you find yourself in a conversation where someone shares those kinds of things with you, I think, like you said, Dickie, the most important is to listen, and to not offer advice right away, but just to hear what it is that they have to say. Being willing to, witness to someone's pain is a very powerful thing. And having them be able to speak to it, speak to you or speak to anybody about it, you might be the first person that they're really talking to about it. And just to acknowledge they're struggling. Doesn't mean you have to do anything. Doesn't mean you have to be a therapist. Doesn't mean you have to be You just have to be a human and listen. Um, if you notice somebody in your congregation that doesn't look like themselves, I mean, I've done it. I've walked up to somebody and say, "You don't look like your usual cheerful self. Like, what's going on? You okay?" So, yeah.
Yep. As we have spoken in the past, normalizing mental illness is really, really key to people being willing to acknowledge their struggles and to ultimately seek mental health support. Uh, in Black and Brown communities, especially, it has been so taboo to acknowledge that someone is struggling with mental illness. And one of the first things they would say in that context is, I'm not crazy. And if we could, in faith communities, because faith communities are typically trusted communities, and if we would take responsibility for helping to normalize mental illness, letting people know doesn't mean that you are defective or that your faith is not legitimate, um, then people might be more willing to confide that they are struggling and therefore be able to be directed to mental health services and supports.
Hmm. And I think, as someone who has had experience, my son struggled with depression for over 20 years. And, what I was looking for in the faith community, anytime that I had a struggle, was, just somebody willing to listen and not be, and not that, and not that the prayers were not wanted. It's not that. Like, it's, of course, I want them to pray for me. I want them to pray, with me. Um, and, and I think, and yet there's that feeling also that there are other people in our community who have been, I mean, I like to think that, God has given the gifts of listening, and people who are therapists, people who are psychiatrists, people, it doesn't mean that they're not people of faith and who can help us, that there's this large net of people who are there to help us. And maybe the first step for us as people, if they're coming to us as people of faith, is to recognize that, and that it's not a what do you call it, like, it's not a betrayal of your faith to go outside your faith and say, I am praying, but I also need this extra stuff.
That's very, very interesting insight. And those of us who have ever encountered people who are struggling with mental illness, or perhaps have struggled ourselves, we know that sometimes people choose to suffer in silence because they fear being misunderstood or stigmatized in any way because of that. And people of faith can be um, unusually cruel. And I believe that we could be responsible for changing the climate within faith communities if we, number one, could model compassion and model unconditional love and help people to understand that nothing is wrong with your faith just because you're struggling with depression or you're struggling with anxiety or PTSD or whatever the official diagnosis might be. And people of faith don't have to know about a specific diagnosis. They just need to know that this person does not look like themselves. I've noticed behavioral changes. They seem to have lost a lot of weight. Their complexion has changed. Their hygiene protocols have changed. Whatever catches your attention should spark compassion so much so that you at least ask them, is everything okay?
Hmm.
Okay. And what I've discovered is that people who are leaders in faith communities typically are trusted individuals. And
Hmm.
whereas a person might not seek help because a friend or a family member recommends it, they trust the faith leader that to such an extent that they might seek out some therapy or counseling if their faith leader would recommend that.
Hmm. Hmm. And I just read something the other day about um, you know, how people may be reluctant to even bring it up, Dickie, right? To say, you know, like that they're mad at God or something. And I was reading that, you know, in many of the Psalms and many of the, and Job, you know, like he complained,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, and I think that that also is part of what people can do. It's not that they want to get them stuck in that, but, you know, to acknowledge their own pain and not to say, um, you know, as a support group leader, sometimes like I'll have people say, what did I do? You know, what did I do to cause this? Or I'm being punished because I'm a bad person, you know, and I really think that especially people, faith leaders have a role to play in that sort of conversation to help people understand that um, that's just like a nowhere place to go. You know, if you're looking to find help or whatever, then that's something we can do. But again, like I said, that it's not that you're losing your faith. You know, it's not that you're betraying your faith. Um, yeah, it's just suffering is suffering, and you can talk about it, and you can complain about it, and you can say that you wish it wasn't happening. You know, and
Yeah.
it's not making you less of a faithful person.
Exactly. And nobody is stigmatized if they say I have a cold or I'm battling the flu or some physical ailment. And unfortunately, mental illness has not been viewed with the same level of compassion and respect. And what ends up happening is people go undercover with their struggles because they fear being judged in some way because they are men and women of faith. They're these people. They've been in the faith for so long that they should be free of any such struggles. When the truth of the matter is that trauma that happens in all of our lives
Mhm.
can trigger mental health concerns. And I believe that if we could start to view this whole thing through trauma-informed lenses, people will understand that there's nothing wrong with them if they acknowledge that I'm having this issue. I just read something on social media today about a Canadian singer, I'm sorry, actress rather, who is petitioning the courts in Canada to be euthanized or medically assisted suicide because she's been struggling with mental illness for over 20 years and she's just tired of the struggle. And obviously, her family is distressed by that, and two psychiatrists who knows this actress also are distressed by that because they feel that there is help for this individual. But people can reach a place of hopelessness and they can go into such a dark place that they don't see the hope that others may see for them. That's why it's important that as people of faith, as faith leaders, because one of the things that we should not be devoid of is hope. And if we can inspire hope, if we can model hope, then that gives people perhaps something else to hold on to while they seek professional care and treatment for whatever's going on with them. But when we meet somebody and they're able to put on a smile, we don't know what trauma they have been living with for sometimes years. And they just may be listening for one voice or maybe looking for one smile or one hug. That could be a game changer for so many people who are in despair because of mental illness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we started talking a little bit about you know, how we are you know, sometimes reluctant to reach out to people who we think are struggling. And you know, what I have found is that sometimes people will say, when we do see the person whose hygiene is sketchy now, or they just don't seem like themselves, or if we see them more sporadically than we normally do, or something like that, like something like that happens, that people are reluctant to intrude. You know, they see it as an intrusion. Um, you know, that's private. And And I know we were talking, if I can notice it, it's not private anymore. Like that's how I feel. If it's obvious to me, it's not private. And what has been your experience with approaching somebody maybe who you did notice were
Yeah.
struggling?
Well, I concluded a long time ago, and I think I shared with you and Lisa about the fact that I experienced a tragedy in my circle, my group of faith, a teenager who ended his life, and even his mother, who's close to him, did not recognize his struggle. And sometimes people can be in our presence day in and day out, week in, week out, and we may see something, but feel that because, like as you said, it's intruding into their personal lives that, well, I shouldn't say anything. But I made a decision that if I see something that causes a concern, I'm going to at least explore that concern
Mm-hmm.
in the least intrusive manner possible by asking, hey, is everything okay? If you need somebody to talk to, I'm here for you. Um, let them know that you care. And if
Mm-hmm.
we care about somebody in the faith community, we need to be willing to care for them. So many faith leaders have not healed from their own trauma, so they are not positioned to address somebody else who may be going through a traumatic situation. Even something as simple as grief. If somebody
Mm-hmm.
has experienced a significant death, a death of somebody close to them, their situation is no longer normalized, and they could be struggling with grief or complicated grief. And sometimes they don't need you to come up with an answer for them or solution to them. They don't need you to make them feel better. What they need you to do is be a compassionate person who's willing to be present with them. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times faith leaders will say, or people of faith will say, well, I don't know what to say. So I'm just not going to go around them because I don't want to make their situation worse. Well, the key is that we have to stop putting pressure on ourselves to know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
What we say is far less important than just
Mm-hmm.
showing up for them, being
Mm-hmm.
present, and
Mm-hmm.
becoming comfortable even with the silence,
Mm-hmm.
because healing happens in silence as long as there's a caring, compassionate person who's sharing that silence with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that idea of noticing, you know, um, I have talked a lot about um not here, but I've thought about a lot, I guess. You pass somebody on the street, I normally greet them, even if they're sitting on the sidewalk, if they're, living on the sidewalk or whatever it might be. And I'm not, because I don't want them to think I don't see them. I don't want them to think that they're invisible. Sometimes I'm asked for money. A lot of times they just say, good morning, hon, or whatever they say. But, I think it's that idea of hospitality. I was raised Catholic, and I don't, I have often said that the Catholic Church doesn't always have the greatest hospitality. Protestant churches seem to have a way better hold on the hospitality part. I guess because they do all those big meals and dinners and all kinds of stuff. But, if we're not going to notice one another, you know, and we're not going to see one another, like really see each other, then I feel like that's kind of a problem. And that I always think there's this one prayer, that pray for you, pray for me, my brothers and sisters. And I always think that I want to turn around at that point and look at everybody when I say my brothers and sisters, because I think if we're going there as a faith community, that we really need to see each other, really need to look at each other. And that when there's something wrong, that we feel, I don't know, Dickie, almost like compelled, right? Like, responsible or something to say something. Because if you say this person is part of my community, then I should care and I should say something, even if it might sound intrusive. I mean, I don't really care if people think I'm a weirdo for saying stuff, like I think I just want to make sure that I see them. I want to make sure that person knows I see that there's something not quite right. Um,
Yeah, I totally agree because if people don't feel that they're seen, then how can they feel that they're cared for?
mhm.
You know, um, and I was greeted on the campus of my college when I first went away to school, and I saw, I mean, there was a buzz, people gathering, some of them emotional about um, something that had happened. Later discovered that a young lady who was like 19 years old
Mm,
had taken her life
mm,
on campus, and it had been recent. And uh, my question at that time, because I was not really a part of a faith community at that time, but I felt a shock. What could be so bad that a person who's 19 years old will conclude there's nothing to live for? And
mm.
then over a period of time, I've discovered that people who die by suicide don't want to die. They want to stop hurting.
Yep.
And if they tried alcohol, if they tried drugs, if they have tried other forms of mitigating their pain and it doesn't work, sometimes they come to the conclusion that the only way I can stop hurting is to end my life and it will end my suffering. And that's why it's important that they be seen by somebody who care enough about them to
Mhm.
inspire some hope in them. And I wonder just how many invisible people we pass every day. When I say invisible, invisible in our minds.
Right.
We talk about that unhoused person on the street. Well, what's the trauma? What are the circumstances that landed them on the street? And how
Mhm.
many times do we pass them by and have a negative opinion of them because they're dirty or because they're unkempt, rather than being compassionate and caring about the
Mhm.
trauma that put them there. Okay.
Mhm.
And so when we see people and they're not themselves, could that be the first phase of them ending up living in a cardboard box or struggling on the street with mental illness? So again, we can't be concerned about offending them by asking them if something is wrong. Because
Mhm.
as you said, Lisa, if you notice it, it's no longer private. So
Mhm.
you're not invading their private space. You are sharing a concern based on an observation that you've made. Worst case scenario is they tell you that, nah, everything's okay. They may even tell you to mind your own business,
Mhm.
but at least they know that you saw them.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and the other part is, a lot of people, I think you mentioned this earlier, people can be very guarded. People could just say, my son would sometimes, we would go visit the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist would ask him, how are you doing? And he would say, I'm doing okay. And I would be sitting there thinking, you need to tell him you don't get a shower unless you're coming here, you never get out of your room. Like, and they will, because it could be embarrassing for them to share all those things that they're struggling with. And yet it still comes down to what we said, that if people on the daily, as they say, right, every single time they come into your faith community, every single, if we're only talking about this place, every single time they feel seen, they feel like they're greeted, they'd be more likely to say something, more likely to approach you, or even just another member of the community, if they always felt like, we're so glad you're here. It's a difference that you're here. Um, and they feel that welcome. So, yeah.
Yeah. They have to feel safe
Mm-hmm.
with any disclosure that they
Right.
offer about whatever it is they're going through,
Mm-hmm.
because it may be deeply personal, but it may also involve some guilt or some shame. And so we don't know what forces people into silence. But if there's somebody in their immediate circle that can say to them, hey, listen, you don't have to tell me any details. I just need you to know that I recognize that you're not yourself and I care.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that for a period of time, they may just trust you enough to talk to you about that struggle, and you can then direct them to where they may be able to get some help.
Right.
Trust is not immediately given,
Mm-mm.
it's earned. And so, what we can offer them before trust is gained is I see you
Mm-hmm.
and I care.
Mm-hmm.
That might very well turn out to be a lifeline for somebody who was even contemplating ending it all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just that admission, right? Just the admission of being able to say, you know, I might not be able to, I will, I'm here to listen and I'm here to help. And I might not be able to do everything, but we'll find some solution together, or we'll work toward some solution, or we'll find some resources, or whatever it might be. That you're not, as a teacher, it was always like, everything. Well, teachers don't know everything. And as a pastor, as the faith leader, people think, well, everything, the answers to everything. And that might not always, it's not always the case. And may as well just put that right out front and say, I will help you, though. I will help you find resources, and I will help you, and then that's the job of the faith leader, to be cognizant of what kind of resources are out there. Or if they're not, to start looking, because it's a really, as you said earlier, I think people do, if their faith is important to them, that's the first place they'll go, to talk about it with somebody.
Yeah, but when they seek out support from a faith leader, they should not find ignorance of the topic
Mm-hmm.
or the available resources. One of the things that faith leaders can do is make sure that in that faith community, mental illness is normalized. Like, for instance, May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm.
We can make certain that it's reflected in our bulletins. It's up on the screen with hotline numbers and warm line numbers. So if somebody wants to anonymously reach out to get some help, they need to know that that help is available and
Mm-hmm.
how to access that help, because those lines are manned 24 hours a day, and they're going to find an actual human being and not a recording
Right.
that, when they are desperate enough to reach out, it's important that they reach out to a source or a resource that's going to be there for them, so that that would not be just another area of frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I was looking at something, I just kind of Googled a couple of things. And another thing that faith leaders can do is get trained and certified in mental health first aid.
Mm,
Um, because
excellent. Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of faith leaders and people within the faith community don't recognize the signs of mental illness, and they would perhaps reach out if they were aware of the struggle. And some of the things that we mentioned earlier, such as a person's appearance changing, a person's behavior pattern changes, they're not eating the way they did, or they're eating more than
Right.
they did before.
Mm-hmm.
There are all kinds of signs that suggest to us that a person is not well, but if we don't know what those signs are, then we're not positioning ourselves to be a support or a lifeline for people. So again, there's so many things that can be done, and not just a faith leader, but
Right.
we can empower people within the faith community to also recognize the signs. What if we empower our family members
Right.
to recognize what's going on in their own households?
Right.
Because they're going to spend time with their children or their significant other on a daily basis. And that
Mm-hmm.
person can struggle right in front of their eyes, but they not
Mm-hmm.
recognize what those signs are. And
Mm-hmm.
for that reason, they're not in a position to provide support or a referral for those individuals.
Right.
So
And I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, you go ahead.
And I think what you're saying, what you said earlier is, when um, if someone in their family says you need to go get help, as opposed to their faith person, their faith leader says, I think you need to, pursue some help. It's different. And speaking it from the pulpit, like speaking it out into the congregation, is so powerful in that normalizing of it, that you're sort of, not sort of, that you're saying, this is part of the human condition. And then having those resources available, whether in your bulletin. I just thought of a church that has like a whole display of, mental health help, and with like different, like with the 988 and all the different resources, because I think that also says you can do your faith, and it's not like either or, you know. And that's so important, I think, for people to feel comfortable doing too.
Yeah. And I think that we're going to hear this over and over again, that we have to
Hmm.
normalize mental illness, that it's okay to talk about it. It is no longer taboo. It's not something that needs to be kept in the shadows. That it is not a betrayal of your faith if you say, I need help. Because for so many years in faith communities, people have been told that
Hmm.
you can't be depressed if you are, for instance, in our faith community, if you're a Christian, but many religions share the same sentiment about mental illness, that something is wrong with your faith if you acknowledge that you have one of these conditions. But that's part of the human experience.
Hmm.
And you're telling people that you're not permitted to be human
Hmm.
and experience what you are experiencing without being stigmatized. So we have a lot of work to do
Hmm.
to heal some of the wounds that we created within our faith communities in our own ignorance, because we have basically told people just pray harder, read more scripture, and you'll be fine. And that is bad information.
Hmm.
We need to let them know that you can be a person of faith and be a person who suffers with mental illness. And there are resources out there that can help you with whatever your struggle. And
Hmm.
the earlier we can get that message to people, we need to look for it in our children and our teens, our adolescents, because many mental illness conditions show up very, very early in the developmental stage.
Right.
And we, rather than putting them on Ritalin and some label them ADHD and whatever, perhaps we need to be a little bit more sensitive
Hmm.
about how we assess people and label people, and really hear them
Hmm.
and let them know that they're seen and we care about what's going on. So,
Hmm.
and the faith community, we have people's attention every week
Yep.
for an hour or more, depending on the denomination. But what are we
Hmm.
doing with that time?
Hmm.
We can point them to heaven and let them live hell on earth.
Yep.
That's not a good strategy at all.
Hmm. And I think that that goes along with that the sense of we talked about hospitality and we talked about people feeling welcome, but also that the faith leader is approachable, right? And when appropriate, and when it can be done, that you share your struggles with people so they know that, oh, you understand this. Not that you have to say everything, um, but that they understand that I too went through a dark period. I too struggled with this. And that you have some sense of what they're doing, and so that or what's happening for them, and that they know you understand. They know that you've had that experience.
Yeah. We got to stop acting as though we're okay when we're not okay. If we are able to admit that I'm grieving or I'm whatever, then that makes us human. And so
Hmm.
when we approach them, it's one human to another. So by us being compassionate and empathetic, and by us admitting that we are living the same human experience that they're living, that is going
Hmm.
to help to normalize things as well. We can't
Absolutely.
we can't hold ourselves up as being a perfect specimen because then they're going to say, I can't possibly measure up to that. And so I'm going to be quiet about my struggle. I'm going to keep it hidden. I'm going to keep it secret because failing to do so will expose me to being stigmatized and being looked down upon as my
Mm-hmm.
faith is inadequate or something. So it's very, very important that we model what we preach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to just step in to say you're both kind of touching on this question of uh, the experiences of the faith leaders. And I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about why you think leaders hesitate to reach out to someone who's struggling. And also maybe if you could talk a little bit about how your own experiences of grief and struggles might inform the way that you reach out and have compassion for others.
I believe that some faith leaders and just people of faith in general are reluctant to reach out because they feel that they don't know what to say. Um, or they feel that the person may be offended by us questioning if they're okay or what's wrong with you. And one of the things that I think that it would be helpful if faith leaders would realize that it's better to risk offending them by asking than by failing to ask, and then that person end up with a tragic outcome because they felt that nobody cared. Um, and certainly I've had experiences in the 40 plus years that I've been involved in ministry of um, hearing people say, I never knew this person was going through that or that this person was struggling. And again, a lot of times it's because they did see issues and behaviors, but just didn't know what to do with that or how to interpret that. Um, and so I think that a lot of times faith leaders or people within the faith community would rather be silent and act as though they didn't see something than to acknowledge that they saw it and risk offending somebody
Right.
by asking an intrusive question.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
such an important point. And I just wondered if I could press you a little bit on this about you mentioned earlier how maybe faith leaders haven't dealt with their own issues or their own grief. If you could both say a little bit about that,
Yeah.
as well as anything you wanted to share about your own um, experience with grief and struggles and how that informs how you work with the community.
I do want to allow some time for the questions in the chat, but I want to
Mhm.
share real briefly that my mother had 4 children, and I'm the last surviving child. And each time one of my siblings would die, it had a major impact on my mom. And I found myself giving attention to supporting my mom and not working through my own grief journey. And again, each time that happened, it had a greater and greater impact on my mom. And so again, here I am doing my very best to keep her stable and help her get through her grief. And I realized that I was overwhelmed with my own grief. And it wasn't until later on that it showed up in a way that disrupted my ability to function, even as a faith leader, even as a part of my family. And I had to eventually seek out therapeutic help. So sometimes we can mask our own grief for various reasons, either because we are trying to help somebody else, and in our community, in our profession, self-care is such a major component, but sometimes we don't do a good job at it. We don't care for ourselves, and it's almost like that analogy of you being on an airplane. Put your mask on first before attempting to help somebody
Hey,
else with
Ron,
their mask.
um,
So, but yeah.
tomorrow is going to be better for him now.
Okay, Barbara, you're unmuted.
And along those same, I'm sorry, Dickie, were you finished telling your
Yeah, I'll
story?
finish. Yes.
So along those same lines, I had said that my son struggled for 20 years and I lost him 2 years ago. He ended his own life. And um, at the time, I was always, well, not at the time, really, all my whole life, I was somebody who I can do it, I can do it, like sort of like, I do it myself kind of thing. Like, I don't need your help, I can do it, I can do it. And, that was something that I could not do myself. I could not get through that myself. And I was really, uh, was so grateful for the people who were around to help me. And even though it was very difficult for me to accept help, I did. And then recently, I read something that if you are the kind of person who refuses help, when you help somebody else, there's this little tinge of, you should really be able to do this on your own. In that it could be, if you're not willing to accept help yourself, if you're not able to accept the fact that, yes, you are weak and that you sometimes need help, somehow it might come through that those other people who you're helping, not that you're looking down on them, but there's just this little tinge of, if only you were a little bit stronger, maybe you could do it without help. And as soon as I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, I am never turning down help again. Anytime somebody asks, if they can help me, I'm going to say, absolutely, you can help me, because I don't ever want anyone to pick up any sort of anything if they come to me for help. That it isn't anything but, like we've been saying, it's the human condition. We can't do this on our own. We are all in this together. Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
So we're going to move toward wrapping up, and I'll summarize some things, but just wondering if you both have any other pieces that you want to share before we summarize and then move to some questions.
Well, I don't. I'm eager to see what questions we may have in the chat, so that we can address those.
Okay. So I just wanted to summarize a few things because I really felt like what you both said, there were so many great points. So there was a point about try to consider the context of someone who's struggling, and that it's very hard for them to reveal what's going on with them. Lean into the raw humanity of the situation rather than only through offering prayer or faith, and that you're not betraying your faith by sharing about your mental health struggles. That faith leaders need to demonstrate the faith principles that they teach, and that they need to normalize that reaching out for mental health help is okay and is part of the human condition, and that our struggles can give us more compassion and empathy for others if we choose to access that. And one thing I'll just add around that is that mental health struggles are journeys. They're not just one and done. They can develop over time. But I think the most important thing that both of you shared, two things, is that there's trust that needs to be built to make someone listen and maybe take a suggestion to get help. That trust takes time and effort. And that this idea of really seeing and witnessing that person, really listening, witnessing, not judging, not stepping in, not trying to fix it, but witnessing. So appreciate both of you and your perspectives. And we have about 12 minutes for, to continue the conversation. We have a couple of questions in the chat. And one is that, what do you do when someone you recognize is off is in denial about what we see?
That often is an initial response with people who are having mental health struggles. The key is to be consistent and be a consistent presence with them. And you can't force disclosure, but what you can do is say, hey, listen, I do care and I'm here if you ever feel like talking. And they need to both see you and hear that message.
Mm-hmm.
And that continuous thing that you said, like that it's not just that one time that you say something to them. It's that you sort of keep an eye on that person, not become like harassing, but just say, and again, this goes back to how well do you know your people to begin with, you know,
Yeah.
and how well like, would they, if they see it as intrusive, perhaps you don't know them as well and don't have that relationship as much as you should or could. And I think it's that continuous, like ongoing, like you said, like sense of caring that they know about. And even if you ask, how's it going today? Not say, how are you? Or is everything wrong? But it's like, how are you today? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add just a second from my personal experience. I think with my son, you know, it takes a while for him to believe that you're really serious about something. So if you just say how you doing and that's that, he needs a text, he needs a call, he needs a, it takes him a while. And I think for all of us in our human experience, sometimes it takes us a while to believe that you're really there for us. So you could offer it, but maybe you have to offer it 3 or 4 times before I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to trust that you're really offering it, because many times people experience, oh, let me help, or what's going on, but they don't really listen or follow through. So I think that trust, building that trust is really important. And as you said, Lisa, it comes, and Pastor Robbins, through repetition and being there over time. Um, Going back to the question of, um, sharing your own struggles as a connection point for people who are struggling. Um, Tina asked, could it be that faith leaders might feel the person would lose respect for them because they're struggling themselves?
Well, again, that's where it's important to normalize struggle, because at some point everybody does. And if we can help people to understand that it's okay to struggle as long as you recognize the struggle and seek help for the struggle that you have. And if faith leaders are willing to admit that they too are struggling or have struggled, it gives the other person the freedom to acknowledge the struggle that they're in.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I was just thinking about, not that this isn't like a totally, maybe like just a sort of an example to say, if you come to church and you're sick and you're coughing or you're limping or you're doing all this stuff and you're dragging yourself there, to be the leader, that's not a good example of somebody who understands that you need to take care of yourself too. And that present that, and I think like in our culture, sometimes we get the idea that we just have to like power through things, but then it sets a bad example for people that they don't say, I need a break, I'm struggling, I have to take care of this so I can do my best work, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do
Very
you
good.
think about that? Is that right?
No, I believe that that's good. Again, we talk about self-care
Mm-hmm.
because people deserve the best version of us when we show up for them. Um, and I don't know that any of us will always be 100%,
Right.
but we should at least be healed enough that we don't wound them by our own trauma with our own trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why we sometimes have to be careful about how much we share our own story, because they may not be capable of hearing that in their condition.
Mm-hmm.
So we should be
Mm-hmm.
very, very cautious. And as I think maybe hearing and listening and being seen is more important than the stories we share.
Mm-hmm.
And we should be very judicious with sharing, because again, we don't know the person's capacity to hear
Mm-hmm.
what's going on with us.
Mm-hmm.
Another question is, how can you work with family members? So maybe you see somebody who's struggling, but maybe they don't want to connect with you, but maybe you could connect with the family members, or like, what can you say about family members in this conversation?
Well, family members are very important to people who have mental health struggles. But just we should keep in mind that oftentimes people love their family members, but don't necessarily trust them with their mental illness. So sometimes what family members can do at best is to get them to a place where they can hear advice from somebody they trust, as the professor. So our responsibility, I think, as family members, is really kind of be a support and to make sure that we're consistently loving on them and encouraging them to get the help that they need.
Mm-hmm. I did happen to notice in the chat that somebody was, asking about, well, I think it was Tina, like, well, what if we can't wait till we're like perfectly well, And I think that's where it comes into like where we acknowledge our own struggle, and you have to be willing to say, I know I've been struggling, or I've been doing this, or, whatever. I don't seem like myself. Like, and again, like Dickie's saying too, you're saying like, be careful with how much you share. But I think it all goes to that same point that this is just part of the human condition, and we have to figure out how to manage it and do our best.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to let anything that I say suggest that we have to be 100% in order to
Right.
be effective, but we just have to be honest about our condition
Mm-hmm.
and not in denial ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes God works on us while he works through us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be willing to make ourselves available while we ourselves getting help for our own conditions.
Mm-hmm.
How many doctors are in the hospital who have illnesses as well?
Right.
They're not disqualified from being doctors because they have a medical condition. The same
Right.
is true for those of us who are practitioners and those of us who care about other people. We can't necessarily be 100% whole, but we still can be helpful.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. We're all evolving, including faith leaders, so we can be strong and still be working on ourselves. We can be solid and still have issues we're working on. So the two can exist at the same time. So maybe to break down that idea that the faith leader always has to be solid and strong. And if they share weakness, then it's all about their weakness, but that the two can exist at the same time. And I think that's also a great modeling for people who are struggling, that they
Mm-hmm.
have strengths at the same time that they have struggles, that the two can exist at the same time. We're almost at time, but I wanted to just ask if anyone else had a question for Lisa or Pastor Robbins before we wrap up this conversation today. Oh, thank you. Um, Lisa and Pastor Robbins, we really appreciate you sharing so honestly about your experiences, and they're not without grief. And just like with mental health struggles, maybe some of us who may not have mental health struggles but have experienced grief, they can understand that it's a process, that it unfolds over time, and that faith leaders can be a witness to that. And the more they listen and show up, the more likely there's going to be trust to share, to reveal, to accept a referral, or to be able to, get some help. And the other idea of how we can empower the community to do the same, to let's be brothers and sisters for one another. Let's look out for one another. So I want to thank you both so much for the conversation. And I want to share that I will send to everybody information about mental health first aid. I think that was a great point because I
Mhm.
think sometimes with some training and exposure to what's happening, with mental health struggles, then we can be more comfortable because, as was mentioned, sometimes it's the discomfort of not knowing quite how to do it and what to say. But sometimes with just a small amount of training, we can be more confident about what we're doing. And I think I just want to close by saying, our compassion and our empathy, and I see that with you, Pastor Robbins, and with you, Lisa, that you share that. And that's the most important message of all, that
Mhm.
people in your community see that empathy. And that's a real gift to people. So I wanted to thank everybody for being here today and for taking your time for this conversation. Um, we are going to post it on YouTube, so we hope that you'll share it with other people that may not have been able to be here today. But for now, we just want to say thank you so much. Be well, and look out for one another. Thank you.